today. Begins. We're going to be speaking to the Defence Minister and Army veteran Tobias Ellwood about support for ex-service personnel. Reducing rubbish. Retailers and businesses pledge to cut food waste by half by 2030. But does the promise go far enough? And Lucy's Law, the new rules which will see puppy farms banned. Going to be speaking to one of the campaigners coming up in just a few moments' time. For that, today's top stories for you. So far, concerning Julian Assange and his legal tug-of-war, a warrant for his arrest was first issued by Swedish prosecutors back in 2010 after two women accused him of rape and molestation. He denied the allegations. In December of that year, Mr Assange handed himself in to British police and was released on bail, beginning a series of extradition hearings. These eventually ended in 2012 when the Supreme Court ruled Mr Assange should be extradited to Sweden to face questions over those allegations. 3 weeks later, he entered the Ecuadorian embassy and requested political asylum. The UK said he was subject to arrest for breaching his bail conditions. 2 months later, Ecuador granted him asylum, saying there were fears his human rights may be violated if indeed he was extradited. Then in 2015, Swedish prosecutors were forced to drop the molestation allegation against Mr Assange due to time restrictions. However, the investigation into the suspected rape remained active. But it was later dropped by Swedish authorities, and that was back in 2017. Last month, though, Ecuador revoked his asylum and he was arrested by Met police officers for failing to surrender to the court. He's presently in jail. Our Foreign Affairs editor, Deborah Haynes, joining us from central London. Hello to you, Deborah. So the US and Sweden both want a bit of Julian Assange. What's going to happen? Yes, it's a bit of a review of the episode of the show in question. What on earth happened? Sally Lockwood is at Media City in Salford, where Jeremy Kyle is filmed. Do we know any more at this stage, Sally?
We know very little in the way of detail.
Thank you. So many of you sending your thoughts. I'll talk about food waste in just a second. So many of you sending your thoughts in as far as Doris Day is concerned, who's died at the... It's a legal duty to provide secure homes for domestic abuse victims and their children. Prime Minister has vowed to... Let's return to our top story, should we? It's about Julian Assange. He's facing an uncertain future and possible extradition after Swedish prosecutors reopened a rape case against him. Mr Assange has always denied the allegation. Should we talk about it in more detail? Joining us from Bristol is a close friend of Julian Assange, Tracy Worcester. Hello to you, Ms Worcester. Thank you for joining us on the programme this afternoon. Your reaction to today's news from Stockholm?
He does not. Basically...
Why isn't he willing to go to the United States if there's no case against him, if there's not enough evidence against him?
Thank you.
Raping and pillaging. Interesting choice of words. Still to come on the programme for you this afternoon, we're going to be talking about Lucy's Law. Finally, we will see mum with puppies if you want to buy them. Really important. Lucy was a... There she is. Just a few moments' time, we'll have more details on the sad passing of Doris Day. She was 97, in the industry for 80 years. Do tweet me directly if you would like to, @Burley, and let me know your favourite movie or song. Que sera, sera, probably for me. Let me know on that one. We're also talking about food waste. The big supermarkets say that they're going to cut food waste in half by 2030. How are they going to manage that? We'll ponder that. Something to chew over, while you're listening to the sport. And realising you spent much more than expected. Well, one Specsavers customer thought he needed his eyes testing again when he bought some eye drops, I don't know, £4 or £5, and this figure appeared on the till. £4 billion for a bottle of eye drops. Martin Chidlow said he couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the amount pop up on the display screen, as he was only expecting it to cost £9.95, which is a lot for eye drops. Luckily for Martin, it was a mistake and he only had to pay the price on the tag. How reassuring. £4 billion for eye drops. Quick look at the weather. Coming up in just a few moments' time for you, the new law aimed at cracking down. Now, a new law which will ban third-party sales of puppies and kittens in the UK will be introduced in 2020, next year, next April, in fact. Lucy's Law, named after a Cavalier Charles Spaniel who died in 2016 after being poorly treated on a puppy farm, aims to crack down on unethical breeders and dealers. Joined by the Dogs Trust Senior Public Affairs Officer, Charlotte Longster, Charlie, and rescue dog Peanut. Hello, Peanut. Hello, Peanut. Yeah, we'll work on that. But first, let's go to the founder of Pup Aid, Mark Abraham, who campaigned.
So Peanut was advertised for sale online. She was purchased by a couple who actually only had her for a couple of days. I think they very quickly realised the responsibility of owning a dog, and they took the obviously very difficult but responsible decision to bring her to Dogs Trust so that she could be rehomed to someone that perhaps had that time and was able to make that bigger commitment. So Peanut is now the lovely dog of a colleague of mine. So it's the selling of a puppy away from the place it was born and from mum. So
life that the dog would have had before you've purchased it could have all sorts of problems, illnesses, massive vets bills as a result.
Absolutely, one of the big
markets. I mean, he campaigned for a very long time.
It is. The puppy trade, as we well know, has been a real, I guess, a blight on the fact that we are a nation of animal lovers. It's a really, as Mark said, a really welcome first step. We urge the government to, introduce those extra measures that will make sure this ban is a success.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that she's so wound up, and Peanut is so wound up and doesn't really want to, sit on my sofa. Yeah, I can see that. It's good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed. Thanks a lot. Up for you today, tackling mental health issues as the week of awareness begins. Going to be speaking to the Defence Minister and Army veteran Tobias Elwood about support for ex-service personnel. Reducing rubbish, retailers and businesses pledge to cut food waste by half by 2030, but does the promise go far enough? And Lucy's Law, the new rules which will see puppy farms banned. We're going to be hearing from one of the campaigners in just a few moments. All of that coming up, but first, quick look at today's top stories for you. Charges which date back to 2010, but the inquiry has been revived at the request of the alleged victim's lawyer. Sweden's Deputy Director of Public handed himself in to the British police and was released on bail, beginning a series of extradition hearings. These eventually ended in 2012 when the Supreme Court ruled that Mr Assange should be extradited to Sweden to face questions over those allegations. 3 weeks later, he entered the Ecuadorian embassy and requested political asylum. The UK said he was subject to arrest for breaching his bail conditions. 2 months after that, Ecuador granted him asylum, saying there were fears his human rights may be violated if he was extradited. 2015, Swedish prosecutors were forced to drop the molestation allegation against Mr Assange due to time restrictions. In other words, they'd run down the clock. However, the investigation into the suspected rape remained active, but it was later dropped by Swedish authorities, and that was in 2017. 2 years ago. Last month, Ecuador revoked his asylum and he was arrested by Met police officers for failing to surrender to the court. Our Foreign Affairs editor, Deborah Haynes, joining us now from central London, speaking to one of his supporters in the last hour, Deborah, and they were saying it's unfair for him to be taken out of the United Kingdom to face any charges in Sweden because he will inevitably find himself, as a result, in the United States, and everyone should write to their MPs. Recording an episode. ITV says the show will take a break in order to conduct a review of the episode of the show in question, which was recorded last week. Our correspondent Sally Lockwood is at Media City in Salford, where Jeremy Kyle is filmed. What more do we know, Sally?
Okay, I've spoken to several ITV sources.
Charlotte Near stayed in a refuge herself. She now runs one in Surrey. Hello, thanks for joining us here in the studio, of course. Tell us about your story, first of all.
So, some years ago, I was married to somebody that was we put a lot of work into is the therapeutic support for the children because they've lost everything. We've got a battle at the moment with not being...
Come on the Kay Burley Show for you this afternoon. We're going to be talking about veteran mental health. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, so talking about that in more detail and indeed the sport. As promised, coming up on the Kay Burley Show in just a few moments' time, how the government plans to address the mental health challenges facing our returned servicemen and women. We're going to be speaking to the Defence Minister. There he is, Tobias Ellwood, a veteran himself, and also a former MI5 officer who retired after suffering from PTSD. Fascinating debate coming up in just a moment. Stay tuned.